Good morning, good morning. Happy Saturday. Welcome to the Wisdoms of Generations panel. My name is Frannie Neal, and my co-moderator today is Gorritz. Would you like to say hello?
Yes, hello everybody. It's so exciting to be here with y'all today.
So first, before we get started, let's go around and give introductions for our elders. If you could say your name, where you're at, and also what year you were a CSJ elder with the organization, that'd be great. So why don't we start with our first one, Dr. Hutchins? Would you like to go first?
Okay, I'm Michael Hutchins, and I was the first president of CSJ 22 years ago, I guess it was. And I'm in Tucson, Arizona right now. Is that it?
Sounds great. Let's see. Lauren, you're next on my screen, so why don't you go next? We'll just go that way.
Good day, everyone. I'm Lauren Shure. I am in Miami. So I am a counselor educator at Barry University, little private school down here. And I am currently serving as past president. So Michael, in a way, I feel like, maybe we kind of connect this circle in a way. So thank you everyone for being here. I'm really excited about this conversation.
Judy, would you like to go next?
Sure. I'm Judy Daniels. I live in Hawaii and work for the University of Hawaii. I'm a founding member of CSJ and founding board member. And I'm excited to be here and be amongst all these great folks that I've worked with for so many years, and look forward to the conversation.
Well, you're next on my screen.
Who did you call, Frannie? I'm sorry.
Oh, Selma, sorry.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't get that. I'm Selma Yznaga. I am at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, which is on the border of Texas and Mexico. And I was president in 2013.
Jane, would you like to go next?
Sure, I'm Jane Goodman. I'm in Florida right now for another 5 days, and then I'm going back to Chicago for sort of the rest of my real life. I'm not good on dates. I was president of CSJ some time ago. Somebody probably knows when it was, not me. And I've been the retired rep before that, and I will be the retired rep again. So I have no claim to wisdom, but I can claim longevity.
Thank you, Jane. And Dr. Anna, would you like to go next?
Sure. It's so funny to be called an elder because I remember just starting up with CSJ. And I'm also like Jane, I'm not very good with dates. I'm past president before Lauren. And I've been involved with CSJ for 5-6 years now. And so that's why I find it funny to be called an elder, but I guess I am in some ways. And so I welcome all of you here. And I'm in New Jersey and I'm originally from Chicago. So Jane, I'm jealous you're heading to my hometown. And I work at Nyack College in New York City on their online mental health counseling program. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you. Rachael, you're next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rachael Goodman. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm an associate professor at George Mason University. I had to look up the dates, so this will be helpful for Jane and Anna because Jane was right before me, Anna was right after me. So I was president from 2017 to 2018. And I am currently co-chair of the membership committee, and I'm getting ready to start as the governing council rep. So really excited about that and really thankful to see all these familiar faces and just think about how much help and support I received during my presidency. And just very grateful for the support and the involvement of folks who've been with us from the beginning, and then also more recently. It's just really, I felt very supported during my presidency and in my other endeavors with CSJ. So thank you. Good to see you all.
And last but not least, Stuart, my friend.
Yes, it's fun to see people for the first time. Frannie and Frank, I think this is the first time we're seeing each other. And Michael, it's been, I think, a decade and a half since we've seen each other. So it's really fun. So I'm Stuart Chen-Hayes. I think I was the third president, certainly a co-founder. I think it was Michael, Farah, and then me, if I remember correctly. Couldn't tell.
No.
Oh, well, then I'm off already.
You're like 4 or 5, Stuart.
Fifth, sixth.
Yeah.
So I did not look it up. So anyhow, fairly early on, I was early treasurer, that I know. So,
Yes.
So I am professor of counselor ed, school counseling, and soon also mental health counseling at CUNY's Lehman College in the Bronx. I live on the Raritan River, surrounded by Rutgers campuses in Highland Park, New Jersey. And I was very involved in CSJ, and then I went away and have done a bunch of other things, and now I'm back. And I am co-leading the workshop that is soon to be announced for white CSJ members who want to work on anti-racism. So Lauren and I have gotten very close. Selma and I have gotten very close. I've seen Jane and Judy again, and it's been really fun. Rachael and Anna as well. And I didn't know, Anna, that you and I are both from Chicago. Anyhow, it's great to be here, and it's great to be back.
Represent the Chi-Town.
So Frank's gonna kick us off with our first question. Go ahead.
Yes. I think our first question is really based on the idea that, like, you know, students that I'm working with now in counselor education, they want to know, like, where do we start and how do we tie back our work as counselors to the community? So the first question we have is, based on your wisdom and experiences, what's your advice on strengthening ties with like local community members while we're doing this social justice work?
Let me take part of that. I think it's really important for us to be involved in community organizations. So serving on community boards, whether that's a school board. At one point, I was on the LGBTQ advisory committee to the mayor and city council of Tucson. So those kinds of activities, whether it's PTA stuff, and we bring our skills as counselors and advocates into those other kinds of activities. The other thing, when I had a practice, I had a men's group, and part of what my men were expected to do in that group is spend 1 hour a week doing something in the community as part of their ongoing counseling involvement. So it's looking at how do we make the connections with agencies to help our clients volunteer, so that that's part of their healing process. I'll stop at that.
Jane, would you like to go?
Yeah, I'd like to talk about it from two perspectives, building on what Michael just said. One of the things I've tried to do in every job I've had is to have an advisory committee that helps me. That's my way of reaching out into the community to hear what people need. So when I worked with laid off auto workers, we got laid off auto workers to be our advisory committee to tell us what they saw the needs were. That also means that we establish contacts in the community. So in addition to the laid off auto workers, we had some UAW, in our case, officers who got involved, some Chrysler people, some of the people who worked with the unemployment programs at the local community college. It's a way of establishing communication, but also alliances. And my experience with all organizational stuff is that people feel closer to you when they're giving something to you, more than when they're getting something from you. They feel committed. And so when I've hardly ever had anyone say no when asked to be on an advisory committee. And yeah, you have to buy some coffee and muffins maybe, but it's a great way to reach out those connections. The one other piece, what Michael talked about, whenever I taught consulting, my students had to have a project. Now I couldn't make them do the project, but they had to write up a project, and most people did them because they had done all that work to write it up. Their projects needed to have a social justice focus, how they would intervene in the community on something that they defined as social justice. I never did that for them, but it gave them a very safe way to think about it, to take that first step out. And many of them have stayed involved and still do that kind of work. So, quick answer.
Stuart, go ahead.
So I love this question. And to me, you start with who you are. You start with an identity that's important to you, and you start with that. So I came to most of my social justice work flying out of the closet as bi for 10 years and then gay and now queer and who knows next. So that was where I began, but it's certainly not where I ended. And I think about in my school counseling classes, we have 5 pre-pracs. We put students in schools every semester they're in the program, and they go out and do something similar to what Jane shared. They have to do a particular activity. And we have them look at issues around multiple cultural identities, social justice from the very beginning. So by the last semester, when we do the advocacy and leadership class, that class now is almost exclusively people from the community coming in as guest speakers and talking. Parent activists, student activists, union activists, everybody I can think of. And if you aren't living on Twitter, you should be, because I find all my best activists on Twitter. And if you aren't following my Twitter account, please feel free. It has completely changed my life in the 6 years that I've been on it. Also run for public office. I did and I won. And it was really cool. So I'm involved with a small political party, and I have an RFP out now to do anti-racism, anti-oppression training for the entire group, and we'll see if I am selected. I've also become incredibly involved in my union, and I've become very involved in rank and file struggles. And I have found that that is the best community organization. We fight a lot with the leadership. We tend to be very conservative, but if you really want to make change around the planet right now, it's in unions. And so that's been where I've put a great deal of my energy when you all haven't been seeing me, but now I'm back.
And if I can just add one other idea I have about this, I'm learning a lot from this because I haven't done such formal organizing as that, but what this question really makes me think about is being in community with people. I love what Stuart said about, identify a part of your own identity that you really want to learn more about, that you want to advocate for, with other people. And I think it's right. If you're going to advocate for people, you have to be in community with them. So patronize businesses, spend time with folks, go to events, hang out with people, get to know people and communities. And I think that gets at what Jane was saying too, that when you're in community with people, then you collaborate and you work together, and that's empowering for everyone. And I think that's really how we can make the biggest impacts. Yes, the relationship building piece, and find something that you're passionate about. I think when you do this work, you end up finding these themes that come up over and over again for folks, right? Like, where are the injustices? Where are people struggling? And when you see those patterns, that to me is always that entrance. And okay, so this is obviously a systemic issue. How can we work together to start to chip away at it?
Absolutely. Thank you. That's a great point. I think community is key, and definitely something we can all think about. So the next question that we thought of was, throughout your years of your work, what is your advice when we feel burned out in advocacy work other than the traditional self-care response? So that kind of piggies back off of the community. What else would you recommend for that activist self-care? I know we have Dr. Shakila on here as well. She does a lot with that. But I'd love to hear from our panelists as well. What are some thoughts on that? Thank you.
So when I came into the meeting, I apologized to Lauren for stepping down from a committee position, chair of a committee that I had agreed to do. And then I started feeling myself going into burnout. And so I had to put the brakes, pause, be able to give myself permission to respect my limits and be able to, in my viewpoint, feeling like I was disappointing Lauren and CSJ, and be able to tell her, right now I can't. And I can't, not only because I'm getting exhausted, but also because I know I can't deliver the quality of work that I want to do. So, and Lauren graciously is very accepting and okay with my decision. And so things will move on. And so that I share that example because it is currently happening to me. And I have to find those ways to say no and set those limits, and now feel guilty for not doing those things, because I do believe social justice is action. And so I want to be able to do action, but there are seasons when we have to just step back a little bit and engage in other actions that I'm doing. And then along with building relationships and communities, there was a woman in my neighborhood. She was on the front page of the town paper because she was the first Black woman to be on the school board. And so, and I reached out to her. I found her like on LinkedIn, you know, I just Google searched her. I found her on LinkedIn. We connected and we had a Zoom meeting, and she met my kids, and she has kids. And then she's part of a like diversity group of mothers of color in a predominantly white affluent suburb that I live in. So I joined that community. And so when like another article came out in the paper of some high school girls who were giving like racist videos, I texted her right away with this. I said, can you believe this? Another example of this BS, right? That we think in our kind of nice little suburb, we don't have racism happening, right? But it's in our local paper. And so just that connection helps me with my own like burnout and self-care, is to be able to go to people that I know get it within my own local community, to just like vent and have a conversation about like, I can't believe this is still happening kind of thing. So that's what I would say is, one, putting those limits and being okay with that. And then two, connecting with your local people when there's stuff you want to vent about.
I feel like there's nothing left to say after Stuart's dark chocolate. That's, yeah. But I do want to piggyback on something that you said earlier, Stuart, and that was starting with your identity. And I would extend that to also recognize what your interests and your gifts are and go with those. So if you love being with people, be it, you know, organize marches and be it rallies and that kind of thing. If you don't like being with people, don't do that. That's the recipe for burnout, when we are volunteering to do stuff that we really don't like doing. Do the things that fill your cup and bring you joy and help the world. I think that's really, really important to recognize. And then I think also just always acknowledging that by our very nature, we are vulnerable and at risk for burnout, because we are caring, compassionate, collectivist people who like to be known as people that other people can count on. And so when Dr. Anna says she didn't want to let Dr. Lauren down, I know exactly what you mean. It's an awful feeling to say no to somebody that you respect and care for. But we have to learn to say no. And I would push back just a little bit on the seasons of caring for yourself, to say that has to happen all year long. It can't. I think I've done the seasons too, where I get to the point where I'm just burned out, and then I have to say, I got to step back from everything. And in my old age, you'll get here someday, Anna. I'm learning that I need to do it all the time. Say no a little bit all the time.
I would just add one thing in there, which is that when you find your passion, and your passion is equal to what you're doing from a social justice perspective, that sort of continues to feed itself. But again, as Selma and Anna have said, you know, also knowing where your limits are and when to step back and when to step forward, you have to kind of continuously monitor those things. But again, finding your passion and moving with it, it feeds you.
Okay.
One thing.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's just that I think the work that we do is so incredibly difficult. And I can look back over a fairly long history and see how far we have not come. I can also see how far we have come. And one of the ways that I deal with this is to try to look at, yeah, we made this change. No, things aren't all better. They're nowhere near as much better as I think they should have been after all the work. But to find ways to celebrate those small successes, and even to look for small things that you can do, that you can have a success at, so that you can celebrate that, because the big picture is very big.
Yes, I love that so much.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add one quick thing, because Anna was talking about how she had to say no to something, but she actually, Anna, you stepped in big time when I had to step down, because I was going through treatment for cancer, and that was an incredibly hard time. And so just the lesson of saying, of me needing to ask for help, and Anna, you stepping up. I mean, please don't forget that, and that you, were just amazing at that time for me. So thank you. And I also just wanted to add that I try to think of this in terms of community care instead of self-care. And I use that term intentionally, and I use it in my classes to think about how do we, when we're in positions of power or in places where we can do this, how do we structure our spaces so that they are caring, supportive spaces, instead of making it an individual, like, go do more self-care, go do this individual thing, right? Like, how do I, as a leader or an instructor or in whatever position I'm in, how do I create supportive systems of care? And so I start and end when I teach our trauma class, I start and end every class with a community care exercise. And it takes time away from content, right? But it's really important. And it's important to me to model that I'm prioritizing this as an instructor. And I think we can do that in different spaces where we are in leadership positions or where we have power over those structures and systems, but they need to be systemic, not individual.
Stuart, go ahead, and then we'll go to Michael one more.
So Rachael, your comment right there brought me to one of our founders who's with us in spirit, but no longer in body, Mary Smith Arnold. And when I was a student in her classes, she taught me the power of check in, check out, a feeling at the start, a feeling at the end. I've done that ever since. And I wanted to bring that back to what it's been like teaching in the Bronx in the midst of twin pandemics. I never dreamed I'd lose students, that they die to COVID. I'd never dreamed that I have so many students sick from COVID, so many who've lost jobs. I put in the chat one of my favorite people I found on Twitter. Are any of you familiar with Sarah Goldrick Robb and her work at the Hope Center for College Community and Justice? We've become incredibly close. She's the scholar who's been doing all the basic needs research, showing that before the pandemic, fully 1/3 of college students were housing and food insecure. And just a week ago released the new data on students in the pandemic. Now it's almost doubled. And so I want to go back to, as students in social justice right now, it's okay, and it's really important for you to acknowledge what's going on with your mental health. I know my mental health's been affected. All of my closest friends who tend to be counselors or counselor educators, we're all back in counseling because we've gone way beyond our limits. The level of pain right now in terms of racism is so extreme. The trauma in my own family, the people of color in my family no longer feel safe in this country. What that's like to live with every day as an ally is very different from being a person of color. I feel like I am doing intensive trauma work every week just to keep my students going, my colleagues too. So I want to really acknowledge it's important for us to have a place to talk about how bad things are. And I love that folks are saying no, because that's critical. And so I've been really choosy. Things that I feel are going to inspire me, I'm going to say yes to, and things that aren't, I won't. And I get concerned about folks who are not full professors, who are not tenured, because I think your mental health is even shakier right now because of all of those pressures. If you're in an institution that supports you, this is the best work in the world. But if it's not, you absolutely have to find those supports, because we can't afford to lose any of us, and we can't afford to lose any more. So take care of you, reach out to any of us so that we can be supports to you, because this is the hardest, at least I've ever seen it. And I don't want it getting any more hard. I want it to get better.
I thought I saw Michael's hand. Did you want to respond to that question?
And Stuart brought something else to me that I want to go to. I have become passionate about cycling. And today is the first time in the last 4 months that I didn't bike because of this event. And I figured, okay, this is more important than my cycling right now. But I also hear an assumption in this group that I think is important to acknowledge. We talk about all of you are counselor educators. I'm a counseling practitioner, and I am seeing with my practitioner friends, and I've retired, so I haven't seen a client as such in about 5 years. But let us not forget that counselor education is different from the practice of counseling daily. And it is really important to be tuned into what it is that counselors are seeing one person after another, day after day after day. I've been part of the mentoring program now with ACA that has just started, and I'm working with 2 counselors, one from Chicago and one Latina from rural Colorado. And the isolation is really important to acknowledge and be present for. And I'll stop with that.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much. And, you know, I thought back to something Stuart was saying, and it led us to the question of the next question. How do we deal with being at an institution where we are getting pushback for our advocacy? So when we are in these tough environments, like, what do we do? Because, you know, I know so many students who would love to know that.
Go ahead, Judy.
I was just going to say, I have plenty of practice with this. So I think that one of the old sayings is that if you're not getting pushback, then you're not actually making progress. So part of this, I think, is that you have to realize when you get that pushback, you're actually coming out very strong from a social justice perspective. So I think that I've always gone back to that saying, so I can say to myself, it's okay, I'm getting the pushback because I'm actually making some change and I'm changing the systems that don't want to be changed. So I think that one's really, really critical. I think you also have to assess your position of strength. And for example, people have talked about counselor educators. You have to look at whether you're tenured or not tenured, what you're willing to risk, no matter what institution you're in or institutions you're trying to make change in. What are the risks? You have to assess that, and you have to make clear choices about what your willingness is to risk that, or the potential willingness of what may happen, what the outcomes will be. And I think you also, it's really critical to network with other people, both within and outside of that institution. So you need those supports within, if you can find them. You also need the supports, and folks have talked about this, outside of the institution as well. And then I think you also have to gauge, you know, you can push institutions so far and then you get tremendous amount of pushback. And so you have to sort of gauge where that line is. And again, from a risk standpoint, am I willing to go over the line? Am I willing to push it beyond where that institution's willing to go? And then what are the potential consequences, and am I okay with it? And I think that the other piece is always to know that, you know, you're going to be called names behind your back. You're going to have a lot of resistance within an institution. And so you have to, and you're going to be isolated. There's lots of strategies that institutions use, no matter what that institution is, to try to isolate social justice folks. So you need to be very aware of those and feel okay within yourself of, you know, again, sort of making those risks and figuring out how to support yourself, but also how to keep moving forward within it. From a university perspective, I would say the other thing is make sure that you have alternative emails, because universities can monitor your emails at any point they choose to and use that against you. So, so that's another just little tidbit of a strategy. I could go on, but I'll leave it at that.
That was perfect, Judy. Thank you for articulating that so well. I would add, I've had some experience with it also, and I would add a couple of things. The first one is that you definitely have to have a lot of courage, and you have to have a thick skin, which Judy already said. But I would also think about who your audience is, who you are trying to influence, who you want to change, and how you can do that and deliver that message in a way that they can hear it. The mistakes that I made as a young advocate were that I was very passionate, and I was very insistent, and I was very myopic, and I knew what was right. And I think we all have that sense, right, of what is right. But a lot of times we're trying to sell this to people who don't want to buy what is right. And so do we just take our stuff and go home or get fired? Or do we find a way to deliver the message in a way that's palatable so that we can continue to move forward? I think that those were some of the early mistakes that I made, that I said, I don't understand why we have to sugarcoat this. I don't understand why we have to do it in increments. It's the right thing. Everybody just get on board. And I got shut down and shut out many, many times and found myself with no opportunity to effect change. And so know who you're talking to. And again, just to emphasize something that Judy said, do the networking. Another mistake that I made was trying to address people and systems in a more global way. You have to do it one-on-one. You have to build relationships with people so that they know who you are and they know where your heart is and why you're trying to make these changes and can support you in public and get behind you.
Can I broaden the conversation a little bit to not only looking at where we work, but looking at counseling organizations, counseling associations? Obviously, we're committed to CSJ. Those of us who are on this panel have spent a fair amount of our free time, quote unquote, with CSJ. And I always described CSJ as the conscience of ACA. I've been very involved in ACA also, but CSJ is the group that pushes ACA to take stronger positions, to do certain things. And I think as we look at how we can deal with pushback, sort of jokingly, people would periodically say, okay, well, Jane's going to want us to do this, not necessarily agreeing, but knowing where I came from. But the fact that I then laugh about it and say, yeah, I do want you to do this, and this is where I think we should be heading, is a way of making those incremental changes that you're talking about, Selma, that we can't do everything, but we can do something. And if we need to look at more than one avenue for that kind of work, and I think associations are an important one. ACA has, I don't know, now 60,000 members, something like that. So even though CSJ is growing beautifully, we're still a kind of small number. So we look at, as you look, Rachael, at being on governing council, we look at how we can take our small numbers and make them powerful to make change within the whole organization. Just want to add one thing, just so we don't forget. The advocacy model, which was originally developed by ACA, but by CSJers and has been updated. It's on the ACA website. And for people just starting out, when you talk, Michael, about seeing clients, talks about what you can do at the individual level, what you can do at the organizational level, what you can do at the global level. It's really a blueprint. It's very concrete. It's very specific. It doesn't require you to be, you know, a big guru or, you know, the Dalai Lama. It requires you to be somebody who can take some actions. We have to keep pushing ACA to keep it available, right, Judy?
Yeah, I'm going to jump in here, Jane, because I've been on the ACA Governing Council now for 9 years. And ACA developed a policy in 1990 that restricted any social justice work at all. Every time I tried to bring up social justice motions or other things, they'd flash the policy up and say, no, you can't do that. Plenty of these folks here have been on the governing council as well. So I worked very strategically to change that policy. So I think when you look at institutions, look at what the policies are and what those policies are that are trying to restrict the social justice advocacy work, and then make those changes. And at first I tried to just get rid of it completely, but that I knew that wasn't going to go. It didn't go. And so then you got to kind of punt back a little bit and say, okay, they're not willing to give it up completely. So how do we change it in a way that they can see it as acceptable, but still push forward the social justice issues? And so how do you revise policies in a way that will support social justice work? I also had the opportunity to be on the governing council when we created the strategic plan, vision, and mission for ACA. So I was one of the key people to create a social justice as one of 3 pillars. There's lots of opportunities if you're in the right spaces to create those foundational pieces for social justice to then exist. And once you have those pillars within the organization, then you can build on them and you won't have as many barriers and blockages to the future social justice work that you do, but you have to lay the foundation, which is critical.
And you count your votes. And Judy, I know you did that because we did some of it together. This is a very political process, just like, I won't even say his name, but in the Senate, people count their votes and you have to do that too. And that's true of your institutions. It was true of my faculty when I was a faculty member. Some of this is just hard work. Yeah.
And be willing to be called names and all sorts of things. No matter what institution or organization you're in, you're gonna have a lot of resistance. So you gotta be tough.
I think this also speaks to knowing our history, because the battles that we are fighting now are battles that we have been fighting for a long time. When I first became involved, I was the chair of the ACA Human Rights Committee. And at that time, every entity on ACA had a member of the Human Rights Committee. Now, ACA calls it divisions, and I hate that word. I would like to have us be called associations or something. But that committee sent to governing council something in the neighborhood of 23 motions, all of which governing council passed and then ignored. And so we can go back in our history and say, we have a precedent for taking on social justice issues, and it helps us a lot if we know that history. So our work is not new. It's taking it the next step, and it's important to know that.
I think that's a great point too, Michael, about how so many people just beginning this work say, where do I start? How do I figure out where to start? And how to, Brianna was asking about have a tough skin. I think when you realize you're not the first to do this, right? There's a legacy of this work that you're becoming a part of. Wow, that's really powerful to not only be in community, not only give and receive support, but to learn from the history. And I think Jane mentioned this earlier too, the work we've already done, the work we still want to do, that you're like a small piece of this larger puzzle. I know at least for me, that like gives me a lot of strength and resolve.
So I would also say that a lot of times organizations, like Michael's saying, try to sort of, deep six the work that's been done in the past and ignore things that have passed. So being able to dig up some of those pieces and bring them forward to the organization. Well, look, we've already done this, and we had this motion, and these are the things we've said we would support or do. To keep bringing those pieces back up, I think is critical.
I wanted to add a piece. It also says to us that you need to volunteer for some of the work that doesn't look exciting. Michael and I have spent time writing policy manuals, right? This is not the most fun thing to do in the whole world, but that's where you get the foundation for the places you want to move. I worked on the ACA committee for it wasn't a committee, it was me, for a couple of years to go through all of the old policies, all those human rights things, Michael, every one that had been voted on at some point, find out whether it had ever been unvoted, whatever that word is, rescinded, and then make a new policy manual so we could find things. And in doing that, we were able to bring back to the fore these policies that Michael's committee had sent, that some others had done. It's not sexy work. You don't get much visibility. You spend a lot of time looking at fairly boring things, but you have to do that. And I think we all sort of have to take our share and our time of doing that, because it does provide that foundation, so that then you can say, yeah, we do have a policy. How are we going to do this policy? Not should we have it, right? Because we've agreed we should have it. Now let's move to action. If you don't have that base, then you just talk all the time.
And you could end up hurting the cause.
Yeah, Selma, you and I remember some of this stuff, right? We had some couple tough years.
Absolutely.
Well, that naturally brings us to the next question. What does it mean to you to be a good ancestor for the next generations of counselors to come? So this was one of, I think, our favorite questions that Frank actually came up with, so I want to give him credit for that question.
Which I got
what
from
is-
Layla Saad. Layla Saad is an amazing activist who does great talks, and I hope she's seeing this because then she can reach out to me, we can talk. But I really look up to her and admire her work. So I was like, this is a good question for y'all too.
Frank, you're going to get on our podcast next, right? I highly recommend that podcast, by the way.
Frannie, I don't think social justice is work that we do. I think social justice is who we are. And that we know from a very early age that we have got to be involved in making some kind of significant change. So part of being an ancestor is also learning to step back and allow my next generations to build on what it is I brought to it when I was in my my cutting edge years. So it's learning that we give in different ways at different times in our lives.
Right. And when I think of ancestors, I think of my kids. So, and going to what Dr. Hutchins said, I live social justice. And so my kids also see me modeling it. And they're 8 years old now. I remember my husband's white and I'm Puerto Rican. So they're considered biracial kids. And I remember at the age of 5 when they noticed their skin tone was different. They're like, hey, you know, and they compared skin color. And so that was our starting conversation about race and racism. And I have a boy and a girl. So there's also gender differences. And so I think for me that being an ancestor is teaching my kids what social justice means. And I know that they'll be leaders in their own ways and wherever they are. And then also bringing up people as well. I mean, because you know, Frannie was brought in under my leadership and she's been doing a phenomenal job. And Dr. Ebony White, who's the new president, was brought in through my connection as well. You know, so those kinds of things for me is my role as an ancestor, is contributing for the organization to flourish through connections and through relationships and through the work that I do as well.
I just want to throw out there that I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you too. So thank you.
I remember you, Tina.
Go ahead, Stuart.
So Juanita, Sholanda, Christina, Shaquila, Adam, Tina, Lauren, Brianna, and Tanya, I'm so glad that you all are here. Oh, and Frank too, I don't want to exclude, and Frannie. One day, my hope is that all of you will be where all of us currently are. And I think that's true for every one of us who's on the panel. So the excitement is that someone in their wisdom realized that we would be much stronger as an organization if we put all generations together. And we didn't have this when we started out in CSJ. So I think it's the coolest thing ever. I think it's really a model for other divisions, other associations. And I say just get on Twitter, because that's where all the activists hang out. And if you're not there, it really is where political change is made and occurs. And please feel free to be in contact at any point in time. If there's any issue, anything that I can do to assist. I mean, we've all got so much going on, but I think we can all really assess in terms of helping you get resources, helping you get to that next level in terms of whatever you need. So don't hesitate to reach out.
I want to second Anna's question in the chat.
I just said, does Twitter pay you, Stuart, for
They should. They should.
I know. So he always says, any meeting we're in, he talks about Twitter. Twitter,
I love
Twitter,
it.
Twitter.
Pro bono Twitter spokesman. Similar to what Anna said, actually, I think a lot about my kiddo who's 3, and I just have learned that I can't do everything all the time. I guess that's back to our self-care question, and that there are sort of seasons, not seasons of self-care, but seasons of when I'm able to devote more or less time to things. And right now, 3-year-olds are a handful. So there's a lot of time that goes to that, especially during the pandemic. And I think I just try to find ways that I'm passing on the messages that I want to pass on. So it's buying a lot of children's books that have, different gender identities and different family constructions and different races and cultures and ethnicities. So I feel like I spend a lot of time reading books about reading kids' books about social justice issues, and then looking for ways to just infuse that in my work with my students and everything that I do, just trying to pass on those messages, and and hoping that my kiddo will be part of making the world better.
I love that, Rachel. And I'm going to be thinking about this question a long time after this session, I think, because it's a really deep question. And what I'm starting to think about is this idea of this shared vision for where we want to be as a society, where we want to be as a profession, engaging students, engaging practitioners, engaging everyone in this conversation. What is this shared vision that we have of when there's equity, when there's inclusion in our profession, in our society? What does that look like? And encouraging, motivating, supporting students, mentees, whoever that is, to have that vision and to know that they're a part of that, and that vision is possible, and what do we need to do to get there, and how can we work together to get there? And I'll be thinking about this. So thank you.
I'd like to add a piece. I'd like to remember that we are counselors. This is the Counselors for Social Justice. And we have some very special skills as counselors. We're really good at listening. We are really good at immediacy. We're really good at being present. And one that's hard for me in this context, being non-judgmental. I'm really good with a client about being non-judgmental. When it comes to social justice and advocacy, I am judgmental. But if I'm going to help make change, I need, as I'm working with an individual or a group, suspend that long enough to get to where what Selma was talking about is getting to yes, as they say in the business world, finding the areas where we can agree so we have some base so we can move ahead. It was one of the things I worked hardest on as ACA president in any discussion. I'd say, so it seems like we all agree on this piece. How can we move from there, rather than feeling like we're so far apart, it's hopeless. And so I guess I'd like us to remember who we are. Someone else said that earlier, maybe it was Michael, who we are and how we can leverage the pretty special skills that we have to be more influencing. I was talking about McClelland recently with a friend, and she was saying that, she just doesn't believe that she's big on affiliation, big on achievement, but not big on power. And I said, really, don't you like to influence people? She said, well, yeah, that may be the most important professional thing. That's how I define power in this context, is being influencing. And that somehow, as a counselor type, makes it easier to buy. That being influencing is important, being powerful sort of sounds bad. So just to kind of add that to the discussion, remember who we are.
I'm going to jump in here. I think who we are is social justice advocates and organizers. So what I would also say to this question is that I think we could, ACA has a mentoring program, so several of us are involved in that, but let's get a CSJ mentoring program going where we can have those folks who are a little more seasoned help with mentor folks who are who are students or other things. I know maybe we're doing that, I'm not sure, but we are, okay, good. I think we can do it even more. I mean, I think we can do it on even a larger scale and try to really get a lot more folks involved in it and do it on a large scale.
Yeah, I was going to say shout out to the mentoring program, because I was able to participate last year, and the mentee that I was set up with and I have developed a wonderful relationship and are continuing to work on stuff together, and just because we were connected through the mentoring program. So it's just awesome. So participate in whatever way makes sense for you. But I'm with Judy. Let's grow. We can grow the mentoring program and really make it accessible for more people, because it's just been wonderful to connect with somebody that I probably never would have met, especially in this year of not going to actual conferences, right? So I encourage everybody to participate.
Right. One of the questions that I submitted was, should CSJ still exist? And I think it's really important for us as an association to ask that question. I believe all associations should be asking that question. And we are different from when we started 20-something years ago. We have to maintain a vision if we're going to continue existing. There are other entities within ACA that say they are committed to social justice, and they are. So what makes us different from them? What makes us unique from them? And I think we've been talking about those things in this group today, but we need to continually ask, where are we going from here and how do we get there? And I really appreciate the sharing that people have done, because I wasn't sure before I started this mission, this session, whether I wanted CSJ to continue. And hearing people here talk about the kinds of things that we're talking about encourages me, because it clarifies for me that we do have that unique position. And as Judy said, and as Jane said, we are the conscience of the association. And it's important for us to not lose sight of that.
Michael,
Yeah, I thought of.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, as someone kind of in the middle, right? Like, as far as our legacy goes, I reflected on that question, Michael, when it was in the emails that I saw. And I think what the answer for me was, I think about the anti-racism training that we're having, and how that, even though there's other organizations doing social justice, that kind of training would not happen, I think, without CSJ's infrastructure and commitment to this work. So I think that, for me, that was my answer. Like, we need to be here to be that, to centralize social justice. And like Brianna said, advocacy as well. And if we keep to that value, I think then we do have a purpose to exist, because this is a project that is only happening because CSJ exists, I think.
And I agree with you. And I think we need to let people know that, because part of what gives us that strength in communication is allowing people to know what it is that we're doing and what makes us different. And I'm not sure we always are our best advocates for ourselves sometimes.
And so the great opportunity that we have here, that I have mentioned to folks that are organizing this, is that ACA is going to be following in our footsteps, because ACA is going to be doing some similar types of work. So we should let ACA know, and certainly we can do this through Rachael, that CSJ is taking a lead on it, and that we can help shape what ACA is going to do in the future. And again, position CSJ in a way that it, as Michael's saying, if we let folks know, that creates a sense of leadership. And Michael, I always bristle when you say, should we exist as an organization? And Michael and I have had this conversation many times.
Right.
Of course, because I'm one of the original founding people, I'm like, of course we should be an organization. But it's a good question to ask, and it helps to direct, I think, where we're going in the future and how we continue to be
And to sound like Stuart, we should put this on Twitter.
Well, may I go? I retweet CSJ whenever I can, so you're welcome. I'd love to end the last few minutes. Could we get a sentence from each of the participants to hear what their most powerful takeaway was? Is that okay?
Absolutely. The next part was just questions and answers. So right ahead.
Adam, you want to start?
I was just in awe listening to everything. Being a part of this group has really benefited me. I've learned a lot since joining last summer, and that's something I actually as far as social justice, I had to learn to do more of listening than acting, because when you first join, you're ready to charge in, and you could actually, the criticism that comes from that is necessary to learn to advocate a lot better. And that's something I really got a lot of. And I heard a lot of that in this group today, just as far as learning to listen instead of just charge in.
Tina?
For those who don't know me, my name is Tina Onikoye. I'm actually the professional development co-chair for CSJ, and I'm so grateful to be here. There were so many gems today, quite frankly, but I wrote down a couple of things, but I heard lean into the discomfort, and pushback is a good thing. And when you have pushback, you recognize that you're getting some work done and that you're changing the dynamic and you're shifting the narrative. And that's what we're here to do. For me, it's always been, Dr. Anna, that you had what was it? It was NJCA, you did the presentation with Dr. Smith. It was the keynote. And I still remember that presentation. It was so beautiful. And the way that people it was pushback from other counselors. They were not having it. And I loved it so much. I love the way you handled it too. I always remember that. But that conversation, it was kind of the difference, or how do I say this? How do you tease apart social justice from counseling? And I know we've talked about what it means to be a counselor and using the skills that we have. For me, I can't tease apart being, an activist and being a counselor. And I infuse it in my therapy, quite frankly, and I bring it up. These things I can't not bring it up. To me, it's you're living in the world, you're experiencing it. So if I don't talk about it as a counselor, I think I'm doing a disservice to you. So anyway, to answer your question, lean into the discomfort is a message I got today, and I appreciate you all for being here.
Brianna, a sentence, most powerful?
So I just feel like I'm with my peeps. And I think one of the things that I've mentioned before about the COVID, one of the major pluses that I've got from COVID is to be with more people from around a diverse country, because I don't think I would have gone to this conference if it wasn't virtual. And so I'm so super excited. I hope that we can have more of these gather ups moving forward, where we're sharing ideas and coalescing and setting the vision for the future. So thank you.
Lauren? I'm going to go on. Tanya? Oh, no, Lauren's there. Sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was corralling a dog. I think my biggest takeaway was about kind of the work that's been done and kind of where we need to go from here. I think a little bit about kind of it's a evolving process, and though we've gotten a lot of work done, we have a lot farther to go as well in the process of social justice.
Tanya? Let's go on to Shaquila and then Tanya if she's not there.
I'm here.
Oh, all right, go for it.
Or Shaquila, I'm here.
Yeah,
I serve
Shaquila.
as the school counseling board representative for Counselors for Social Justice. And I work with Rachael Goodman at George Mason University. I think the most powerful thing for me is just the power of collective and honoring your elders. I don't think we nod to that often in the field, but I know just from an activist standpoint, we always believe in honoring those who came ahead of us and their efforts, and how do we utilize that to move forward. So that was really powerful for me. And even in the decisions that we make in our careers is influenced by the work of CSJ members. Part of the reason why I applied to work at George Mason is because of Rachael and her work and seeing her as a president of CSJ. So I think that's what was most meaningful for me, the honoring of those who came ahead of us.
Thanks, Shaquila. Tanya was having difficulty with her internet. So she said, my biggest takeaway is I need to get on Twitter, laughing out loud, and seeing pushback as part of the work. All right. And Sholanda's done the same. Said, this has given me great hope. I'm looking forward to being part of this great work. My takeaway is continue to learn, continue to grow, continue to hope, and continue to get into good trouble by using my voice to make sure all heartbeats are honored and heard. Christina, and then Juanita.
Hello, I'm actually one of the co-chairs for the mentorship committee, and I'm on the task force for the advocacy and social justice program. So I've been really excited to be a part of those for the past couple years. And I think that one of the things that today really did was help reinforce some of the things that have kept me as a member of CSJ, but also to continue to be more and more involved. And I don't know, I want to make the assumption, but I'm not going to, that this is everybody's experience. But I know when I joined ACA about 6 years ago, it's kind of overwhelming to see all of the branches. And I'm like, yes, all of these things, I want to be a part of all of it and do all of this work, but we know that that's not realistic. And I think that one of the things that ultimately led me to selecting CSJ, again, continuing to be a part of it and getting more involved, is this action focus. I really want to do things, obviously talk about them, but I want to do things. And I feel like in the time that I've been a part of CSJ, it has been very focused on doing the work. And so that was kind of reinforced today is, you know, how can we do the work to not only maybe make changes happen or help people to become aware of issues, but also how do we do the work in supporting one another and supporting the people who are out there doing things. And so I absolutely love that. And I'm just excited to continue to be a part of this.
Cool. Back to Frannie and Frank. I didn't mean to take over the facilitating, but I figured I should go with my screen, so I'll be quiet.
I think
That's
Juanita.
okay.
Did Juanita go?
I'm sorry, Juanita.
Did Juanita?
Go ahead, Juanita.
Okay.
She
We
may not
always
be.
want to be inclusive.
Thank
Make
you.
sure.
Great. Well, thank you all for being here today, and thank you to our panelists and to our participants for everything that you did and contributed today. Thank you to Frank, and really enjoyed moderating this together. And if you are available after this, come to the town hall. And Frank, do you have something?
Can I just add a special thanks, Frannie and Frank, for doing
thank
this,
you.
and then also a special thanks to our founding CSJ members and leaders and presidents from past years, and just really supporting us now and us newer leaders. We really, really, really appreciate you staying involved and staying connected and offering your support and a sense of the history too.
Absolutely. So thank you all for being here. And if our panelists could hang on for just a minute so we could debrief, that'd be great. Thank you all for being here. Have a great
Bye,
day.
everybody. Bye, Tina. Good to see you. Bye, Shaquila.
Dr. Melchior.